So the purpose of this demo is to discuss and show the features and enhancements for Design Center 3.0 Update 2, which contains specifically elements to manage the new enclosures, both standard and auxiliary, and the new module and boards, etc., that are possible and will be shipping shortly. For example, the new enclosure. As you can see here, I'm in DC 3.0 inside of enclosure view, and you can see right off the bat there are some major changes or differences from what you've ever seen before from Vantage. What we have created here is the start and the foundation for a change and an improvement to the lighting platform available from Vantage. And at the foundation of that are the Vantage enclosures and the standard dimming module. So as you can see, this enclosure that we'll start off talking about, there are several new changes and enhancements to this enclosure. First off, it's a different color. You can see it's kind of a silvery color, a nickel type color. Additionally, there are no green terminal boards. As you can see, terminal boards are ordered now and shipped separately or in the same container as the enclosure, but not necessarily, they are not shipped mounted inside of the new enclosure. And we get based on the necessity for the new module or the older modules such as the fan module, relay module, etc., which are still possibly placed in this enclosure. You can add older modules such as the latching relay module to this enclosure, and we'll show you that here shortly. Additionally, you'll notice that there's this black kind of back plane device in the middle of this enclosure that is used to mount these modules to both the new module and the existing shipping modules such as the relay or the fan module, electronic dimming module, etc., which all can be mounted in here with their specific terminal boards. This enclosure is also taller. There's a few inches at the top and bottom, which allows for greater flexibility in your wiring as you're bringing the Romex in. Additionally, there is a little bit more room in between each module that allows for more improved ventilation for the modules. But keep in mind, do not run any wiring between these modules here. These enclosures are UL and CUL certified. There's a new jumper available, the short tester, the Q jumper if you will, that you use to make sure your wiring is good before you plug in a module and blow it up. And so those are some of the features about the new enclosure. Obviously it's bigger, different color, module changes, board changes, all very exciting changes, allowing us to move forward with this new lighting platform. Now, front and center at the top of the module, or the top of the enclosure, you can see, is one of the new modules, is the new module. It's the SDM12-EM. It's a 12 load module. Okay, it comes with 4 line feeds. So line feed 1 is for loads 1 through 3, line feed 2 is 4 through 6, etc., etc. So you're going to get now in each enclosure 50% more loads. So you're going from 32 loads to 48, and you're getting twice the wattage output that you used to get per the module because of the doubling up of the line feeds. We used to have 2 on the standard dimming module. This one now has 4. So that's really, really exciting. This module is firmware upgradable. So for example, in the field, if there is an improvement that needs to be made to the module, and there's lots of new features available to this module that we'll be covering in the upcoming minutes with this presentation, but you can update that module to allow for new flexibility through the firmware. For example, with this module, if I wanted to, I could go to System, Update Firmware, Update Module Firmware. Now if I were connected to a controller in a system, that would bring up a dialog box that would allow me to send the firmware down through the controller and the module bus. No USB, it's just through the bus on the back on the wiring harness to that module to change its firmware and update its firmware in the field, which is great. That's never been possible from Vantage before, and we've added that capability now. We're excited to do that to keep pace with the technological changes in the field. Okay, some additional things that are available excuse me, on this module. As you can see, when I select that module, I have a variety of parameters, properties that you're used to seeing, such as name and model, position, etc., quiet mode. Those have all been there before. The line feed, such as the name of the line feed that can be personalized, customized so that you can see that on the reports, the amperage, voltage, whether or not it's arc fault, and that will also show up in the reports that we'll show you a little bit later. So let's leave that one checked. Let's say he's an arc fault breaker. So you've got those properties for each one of the line feeds and for the module itself. Okay, so that's new. One of the new ones that we've added is this area called alert. Okay, now alert is a hard-coded set of 3 alerts that are managed by the device. Now each module, if you guys remember, modules have those LEDs across the top that have over temperature and over current or overload, and then loss of a line feed. Well, this module also has those LEDs at the top, so you can see them indicated. They're sitting there blinking or solid, whatever the case may be. But we've now added through the module firmware that ability for the controller to receive that information from the module and for you to be notified if and when there is a potential problem. So I've added a task in here that we'll review in a little bit. We'll show you how that task is programmed that says, hey, if I'm too hot, send me an email. If I'm too low on my load, send me an email. If I'm too high on my load, send me an email. Or if I don't have a line feed, send me an email. Send me something. Okay? Let me know that there's going to be a problem. And this is going to be the first in a series of improvements to the lighting control system that allows you to maintain really great customer service and flexibility for each one of your systems that you're installing for your customers. Now, that's the information on the right-hand side of this object editor. On the left-hand side, excuse me, you'll notice that there are a set of, we call them child objects, but a bunch of lines in here that are representative of the specific sensors available inside of the module that are monitoring what's going on. In the case of the top one, it's a temperature sensor, right? The temperature sensor is telling us what the temperature is, obviously, what the low range is, what the high range is. We can set that, or we can leave it at factory defaults. And then an in-range and out-of-range task. So these ellipses over here can be selected to choose a task that says, if I'm out of range, send me an email, do something, put a notification on a touch screen, jump to a page, etc. So many things that you can do with that. Same thing, for example, with the power sensor. Power sensor is wattage, obviously. And you'll notice down here that there is a low range and a high range. Now the low range is typically going to be pretty low because as you take a single lamp and dim it way down, say 5, 10, 15, 20%, and it's maybe a 60 watt fixture, or maybe it's even lower. Maybe it's some type of, I don't know, MR that allows you to take it down really low. And that low range you're going to want to have down maybe 10, 15, 20. And that's representative in watts. Now the high range is going to be the anything that you're not comfortable with getting a reading from on over wattage, if you will, right? Over load. So if it's a 20 amp breaker feeding this and it's 120 volts, then it's going to be 1920, which should be the maximum range. But maybe your threshold for comfort level is much lower than that because maybe this is a set of 3 loads in a bedroom and each one's only a few hundred watts. So maybe your high range threshold is at 1,000 watts. Again, that's settable by you, the installer. And we're going to talk about also the current sensor, which is going to be, of course, for amperage. We don't have the same in-range, out-of-range for amperage for this one as we do for wattage. That one's not going to flex as much, but we do have the ability on all 3 of these, power, current, and temperature, to check a box for track. Now, what track does is it's going to allow you to continually pull that sensor to show on a TPT. Okay, so if you build a TPT, we're going to use the get power command, and you're going to show whatever that current is in amperage or maybe on the power sensor you're going to track what the wattage is on that line feed, or on the temperature sensor you're going to track what the specific temperature is on the module. Now that is only for diagnostics purposes. It's not going to make a real pretty screen, but maybe for you, for diagnostic purposes and remote monitoring, you're going to be able to see that via TPT screen or the like. Now, these sensors are really powerful, obviously, because they allow you some discrete, refined, fine control and feedback on a specific module. But going back to that alert, if you will, I'm going to click back on the module. That alert, keep in mind that has a very nice automatic flag on overtemp, overload, and loss of line feed. So 9 times out of 10, the alert is going to be sufficient for your needs. But let's take a look at what that programming is going to be like, or could be like, in this particular case. So let's take a look at editing that task that I've already pre-written. What I did is I wrote a conditional statement that says if, all right? And you can see over here on the right-hand side, I've said if the load level is greater than 0, that's load 1, and if load level 2 is greater than 0, or load level 3 is greater than 0. So basically I'm saying if load 1, 2, and 3 are on, or if any of them are on, and at the same time my wattage is less than 10, or you could say less than 20, as an example, then what I want to do is I'm going to create a task that says send an email to whatever email, daves@hotmail.com, Vantage customer XYZ name, subject is line feed maybe error, and the message would be, in this case, because of the low end of the spectrum, the low end trim, say 10, 20 watts, potentially there's a lamp failure on line A of module 1 in enclosure 1. Makes sense? I wrote an additional conditional logic statement that says else if, or if, same 3 loads, load 1, 2, or 3 is greater than 0, so if they're on, and if the wattage being read from the sensor is greater than, say, 1800 watts, or maybe you wanted it to be 1900 watts. I don't know. Whatever your comfort level is, whatever it should be, then what I do is I write a different email. I send a different message. In this case, I say same email, same from, same subject, line feed error, potential overpower on line A of module 1 in enclosure 1. And you can take and copy and paste these tasks and reuse them for each line feed that you're worried about, and potentially you could do it for every single enclosure and module in the project. Okay? So some interesting things available to you on this new module inside of this new enclosure that allows you to refine your customer's experience from a lighting side and allow a greater level of serviceability. Now, one last thing that I want to show you about this new module, I'm going to double click this module and take it to the exploded view, the more detailed view, if you will, and show you that here are the 12 loads, as you would expect, just like the rest of the modules you can see this in. But what's new that wasn't here before is this, on this table, there's a current and power column. Now, when you are live connected to a controller and you are talking to that enclosure and this module, you're going to get live feedback on the live or updated current or amperage for that line, and the wattage as well for, say, example, line A, loads 1 through 3, what is the wattage? So current is amperage, power is wattage. Notice here that it's also marked as an AFCI, which is what we did earlier. So you can see everything's kind of visible in one glance. Really nice feature to be able to see what you're actively drawing real time on the project, and does that match the load specification as delineated by the blueprints or what has been specified for that particular set of loads. So really nice ability to see that information. Now, let's go back, for example, and just do a couple of the basics. If I wanted to add a new enclosure, I would do exactly what you would expect, right? Right click, add enclosure. Now notice it added a brand new enclosure because those are going to be the shipping enclosures here right away. If I wanted to add a new module, I can right click on a backplane and say add module. And I'm going to go through this whole process. And so now these are my new standard dimming modules, and you can see them being populated here on the left hand side. Here I can get refined information specific to an enclosure, or I can go back to my controller view which shows all of the enclosures together. I can drag load to load, load position to load position, just like I could before in the other enclosures, the legacy enclosure views. Well, what about the older modules? So for example, what if I needed a fan module? So I'm going to come over here to my Vantage Objects. I'm going to drag him into position 2 on enclosure 2 and populate him. Now notice I get the same properties and parameters, right? I get my line feed name, I get the voltage, position, etc. Just like I was going to get, just like I used to get in the legacy enclosures. But notice that there are some terminal boards below that are specific to that module. Now the way this will happen is, as you order this module and the enclosure and the boards, they are all ordered separately or together through the ordering wizard, which we'll bring up in just a second. So you need to make sure that you order the proper terminal boards for the proper module, which we'll do for you inside of Design Center, but just to make sure you know that you can't just swap out terminal boards, because the new module terminal boards are different than the legacy terminal boards. In fact, the new module terminal boards are black. So let's say I had an old dimming module in the standard, in the new enclosure. You can do that. Or maybe I wanted a relay module, and I'm going to drag him into position here. So now I've got a relay module. So now I've got a fan module, an old dimmer module, and an old relay module. Or maybe I had an electronic dimming module. So of course you can see here in this secondary enclosure that I've populated it with older modules, and that's totally acceptable, totally fine. Those will work. There's a special set of boards for each one of those that is going to be required. Or you can bring in the new standard dimming module either from the Vantage Objects, or you can right click and say add module, and by default it will add the new standard dimming module. Okay,